I'm standing in front of a Quick-Lube counter on a Tuesday morning, and the kid behind the register is circling things on a printed checklist with a red pen. Air filter, cabin filter, transmission flush, differential service, engine flush. Every circle costs me 40, 50, sometimes $80. The paper sits there in front of me like a menu at a restaurant where everything is overpriced, and half of it I don't need. I've been doing this for 42 years. I know what's real and what's theater, and I'm here to show you the difference. My name is Hank. I spent 4 decades with my hands inside engines, transmissions, and cooling systems. I learned my trade the old way, from a master mechanic named Eddie, who ran a 2-bay shop in the Midwest and never let a customer pay for something he could do himself. Eddie taught me that the best mechanics aren't the ones who sell the most services. They're the ones who solve problems with what's already in your hands, and what's in your hands today is hydrogen peroxide, a $2 bottle from the pharmacy shelf, the same stuff your grandmother used to clean a scraped knee. In the next 35 minutes, I'm going to show you 12 uses for hydrogen peroxide that'll keep you out of the Quick-Lube and away from the service writer's red pen. 12 tricks that separate the people who understand their cars from the people who just drive them. 12 reasons why a shop owner would rather you never walk through that door knowing what you're about to learn. Trick number 1. Clean corroded battery terminals and restore lost voltage. Battery corrosion is one of the oldest problems in the engine bay, and it's also one of the most expensive to ignore. I've seen terminals so crusted with white, blue, and green oxide that the starter motor won't turn over. The car won't start. The owner panics. He calls a tow truck. The tow truck driver charges $75 just to show up. The shop charges another $150 to replace the battery, even though the battery is fine. The real problem is sitting right there on top of the posts, corrosion. Here's what corrosion actually is. When a battery sits in humidity and temperature swings, the lead posts react with oxygen and moisture in the air. They oxidize. This creates a layer of resistance between the post and the cable terminal. Electricity has to jump through the resistance, and resistance creates heat and voltage drop. Your starter needs full voltage to crank the engine. If the voltage drops by even a half volt because of corrosion, the starter can't turn fast enough. The engine won't fire. This is where hydrogen peroxide comes in. Hydrogen peroxide is an oxidizing agent, but it works differently on corroded metal than it does on skin. When you pour it onto battery corrosion, the peroxide breaks down into water and oxygen. The oxygen bubbles attack the oxide layer and dissolve it. The bubbling action is mechanical. It's scrubbing at the corrosion from the inside out. Here's what you do. First, disconnect the negative cable from the negative terminal. Always negative first. This prevents any accidental spark if a wrench touches both posts at the same time. Then, disconnect the positive cable. Now, you have access to both terminals. Pour hydrogen peroxide, regular pharmacy grade, 3%, directly onto the corroded post and the inside of the cable terminal. You'll see it fizz immediately. That fizz is the peroxide breaking down and attacking the oxide. Let it sit for 2 minutes. Don't rush this. The fizzing action is doing the work. After 2 minutes, take a wire brush, a small one, the kind you'd use to clean a grill, and scrub the post and the inside of the terminal. The corrosion will come off in flakes. You'll see the bare lead or copper underneath. Keep scrubbing until you see metal. No white, no blue, no green. Just clean metal. Then wipe everything dry with a clean rag. When you reconnect the cables, the connection is metal to metal with no resistance layer. The voltage flows clean. The starter cranks at full speed. The engine starts reliably, even on cold mornings when the battery is already struggling. I've seen cars that wouldn't start in winter suddenly crank over like new once the terminals were cleaned. The difference is immediate, and you can feel it. The starter spins faster, the engine catches quicker. The Quick-Lube wants to replace your battery. That's $150 to $200 in their pocket. A new battery might not be bad, but it's not the problem. The problem was $2 of hydrogen peroxide and 5 minutes of your time. Fonte: verificar tempo médio de limpeza de terminal com mecânico certificado. Trick number 2. Remove stubborn oil and grease stains from engine block and valve cover. An engine that looks clean runs cooler and lasts longer. That's not superstition. A clean engine surface allows heat to radiate away instead of being trapped under a layer of baked-on oil and grease. But getting an engine clean without a pressure washer or a chemical degreaser is a job most people think requires a trip to the shop. I've got a 1997 Chevy Silverado that came into my bay with an engine so caked with oil and dust that you couldn't see the valve cover lettering. The owner had bought it used and was worried about leaks. He thought the whole top end needed to be taken apart. What it needed was hydrogen peroxide and a soft brush. Oil and grease are organic compounds. Hydrogen peroxide breaks down organic matter. When you pour peroxide onto a greasy surface, it doesn't just sit there. The peroxide penetrates the oil layer and starts breaking the molecular bonds. You see the fizz again. That's the peroxide decomposing and releasing oxygen bubbles. Those bubbles lift the grease away from the metal surface. Here's the procedure. Make sure the engine is cool. Hot metal and hydrogen peroxide can cause the peroxide to decompose too fast and lose effectiveness. Pour hydrogen peroxide onto the greasy area. Not a little splash, but enough to saturate the surface. Let it fizz for 3 to 4 minutes. Then, take a soft bristled brush, a toothbrush works, or a brass brush if the corrosion is heavy, and scrub in circular motions. The grease will start to lift. Keep scrubbing until you see clean metal or clean paint underneath. For really stubborn buildup, repeat the process. Pour more peroxide, let it fizz, scrub again. I've cleaned valve covers that looked like they hadn't been touched in 50,000 miles. The difference is dramatic. You can see the casting details, the bolt heads, the gasket surfaces. And when you can see the gasket surfaces, you can spot a real leak instead of guessing. The engine runs cooler because heat radiates away instead of being trapped. You'll notice this especially in summer driving. The temperature gauge stays lower. The cooling fan cycles less often. The engine sounds cleaner because you're not listening to oil burning off the hot surfaces. A professional degreaser from the shop costs $30 to $50 and requires protective equipment and proper disposal. Hydrogen peroxide costs $2 and you pour it down the drain without worry. Fonte: verificar compatibilidade de peroxide com sistemas de drenagem. Trick number 3, clean white residue. From coolant leaks and mineral deposits. Coolant leaks leave a white crusty residue wherever they drip. Under the radiator hose connection, around the water pump gasket, on the engine block where the thermostat housing sits. This white stuff is mineral deposit, calcium and magnesium, that was dissolved in the coolant and left behind when the coolant evaporated. It looks like a leak is happening, and sometimes it is. But sometimes it's just old residue from a leak that happened months ago and was already fixed. The problem is that this white crust is hard to remove. It's not grease, it's mineral. You can't wipe it away. You can't brush it away with a regular brush. Most people assume they need a chemical cleaner or a pressure washer. What they really need is hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is an acid at the molecular level, not a strong acid like muriatic acid, but strong enough to dissolve mineral deposits. When you pour peroxide onto calcium and magnesium buildup, it reacts with the minerals and breaks them down into soluble compounds that wash away with water. I had a customer with a 2005 Honda Civic that was leaving white residue all over the driveway under the water pump. He was convinced the water pump was failing and would cost $800 to replace. I looked at it and saw white crust, but the pump wasn't actively leaking. The crust was old. I poured hydrogen peroxide on it, let it sit for 5 minutes, and wiped it away with a rag. Clean metal, no leak. The pump was fine. Here's what you do. Locate the white residue. Pour hydrogen peroxide directly onto it. Don't dilute it. Use it straight from the bottle. Let it sit and fizz for 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how thick the deposit is. Then wipe with a clean rag or paper towel. The residue will come away in pieces. If it doesn't all come away on the first pass, repeat. Pour more peroxide, wait, wipe again. Once the residue is gone, you can see the actual surface underneath. If there's a leak, you'll see fresh coolant weeping out. If there's no fresh leak, then the problem was already solved and you just needed to clean away the evidence. This matters because a white residue that looks like an active leak can convince you to replace parts that don't need replacing. A water pump, a radiator hose, a thermostat housing gasket. Each replacement costs money and time, but if you clean away the old residue first, you can see what's actually happening right now, not what happened 6 months ago. Trick number 4. Dissolve rust from chrome and stainless steel without scratching. Chrome and stainless steel rust. People don't expect it, but they do. Chrome is just a thin plating over steel. If the plating gets scratched or worn, water gets underneath and the steel rusts. The rust expands and pushes the chrome up, creating pitting and flaking. Stainless steel rusts too, especially in salt environments. It's called surface corrosion, or T-staining. I've got a 1965 Chevy with bumpers that were pitted and dull. The chrome was flaking. The owner wanted to replace them for $2,000. I told him to give me a week. I used hydrogen peroxide and a soft cloth, and I brought that chrome back to shine without replacing anything. Hydrogen peroxide dissolves surface rust without damaging the underlying metal. This is different from abrasive methods like steel wool or sandpaper, which remove rust but also remove the finish. Peroxide attacks the rust chemically instead of mechanically. Pour hydrogen peroxide onto a soft cloth, not onto the chrome directly, because you want to control how much liquid is in contact with the surface. Wipe the rusted area with the peroxide-soaked cloth. You'll see the rust start to dissolve. The cloth will turn orange or brown as it picks up the rust particles. Keep wiping. When the cloth gets saturated with rust, switch to a clean cloth and keep going. For pitting that's deep, you'll need to repeat this process multiple times, but each pass removes more rust and reveals more shine underneath. After 5 or 6 passes, the chrome will start to look like chrome again. It won't be perfect if the pitting is severe. Nothing will restore chrome that's been pitted for 30 years, but it'll be dramatically better than it was. The key is patience and repetition. Don't scrub hard. Let the peroxide do the chemical work. Your job is just to keep applying fresh peroxide and wiping away the dissolved rust. For stainless steel, the same principle applies. Pour peroxide onto the stainless, let it sit for a few minutes. Wipe with a soft cloth. The surface corrosion dissolves. The steel underneath comes clean. This is especially useful on stainless steel trim door handles and trim rings on older cars. A lot of people assume stainless needs to be polished with special compounds. It doesn't. Hydrogen peroxide does the work for $2 instead of $30. Trick number 5. Clean white deposits from spark plug insulators and firing ends. A spark plug that's running lean, meaning too much air and not enough fuel, leaves white deposits on the insulator and the firing end. This white deposit is a sign that the combustion temperature is too high and the plug is working too hard. Over time, these deposits can cause the plug to misfire. When a plug misfires, you feel it in the engine. A slight hesitation under acceleration, a roughness at idle. The check engine light comes on. The shop wants to replace all 4 or all 6 plugs. That's $60 to $120 depending on the car. But sometimes the plugs aren't bad. They're just dirty. I've cleaned spark plugs with hydrogen peroxide and brought them back to life. Not every time. Sometimes the plug is genuinely worn and needs replacement, but often enough that it's worth trying before you buy new ones. Here's what you do. Remove the spark plugs. Look at the insulator, the white ceramic part around the center electrode. If it's covered in white, crusty deposits, hydrogen peroxide can help. Pour a small amount of peroxide into a shallow container. place the spark plugs in the container so the firing end is submerged in the peroxide. Let them soak for 15 minutes. The peroxide will bubble and fizz around the deposits, dissolving them. After 15 minutes, take a soft brush. A soft toothbrush is perfect, and gently brush the insulator and the firing end. The white deposits will come away. Rinse the plugs with clean water and dry them completely with a clean cloth. Install the cleaned plugs back into the engine and see if the misfire goes away. Often it does. The engine runs smooth again, no hesitation, no rough idle. You just saved $100 and learned something about what your engine is telling you through the spark plugs. The white deposits tell a story. They tell you that the engine is running lean. That might be a sign of a fuel injector that needs cleaning, or an air leak, or a sensor that's reading wrong. By cleaning the plugs and seeing if the problem returns, you're gathering information. If the white deposits come back immediately, then the real problem is in the fuel system, not the plugs. If the plugs stay clean, then you fixed it. Trick number 6. Remove rust. From metal fasteners and bolt heads without soaking overnight. Rusty bolts and fasteners are a nightmare. You try to remove a bolt, and it breaks. You try to turn a nut, and it strips. Rusty fasteners cost time and frustration. The traditional solution is to soak them in penetrating oil overnight or longer. But what if you need to work on the car today? Hydrogen peroxide works faster than penetrating oil for surface rust on fasteners. It doesn't work as well as overnight soaking, but it works better than nothing, and it works in minutes instead of hours. Here's why. Hydrogen peroxide is both a chemical solvent and a mechanical scrubber. The bubbling action from the decomposing peroxide creates tiny pressure waves that help break the rust loose from the fastener. At the same time, the peroxide is chemically dissolving the rust. Pour hydrogen peroxide onto the rusty bolt or nut. Let it fizz for 3 to 5 minutes. Then try to loosen the fastener. Often it will turn. If it doesn't, apply more peroxide and wait another 3 minutes. Repeat until the fastener moves. Once the fastener is loose, you can remove it and clean it completely. The rust will come away more easily now that it's been softened by the peroxide. This is especially useful for bolts on the engine block, bolts on the suspension, and fasteners in the engine bay that have been exposed to salt and moisture for years. A quick application of peroxide can save you from breaking a bolt and having to drill it out, which is a job that takes hours. I once had to remove the bolts from a water pump on a car that had been driven in the Northeast for 15 years. Those bolts were solid rust. I applied peroxide, waited 5 minutes, and they came out clean. Without the peroxide, I would have broken at least one and had to drill it out. Trick number 7. Clean corrosion from alternator and starter terminals. The alternator and starter are electrical components that sit in the engine bay where they're exposed to heat, moisture, and salt spray. Over time, the terminals corrode. When the terminals corrode, the electrical connection weakens. The alternator can't charge the battery properly. The starter can't draw full current. You might notice that the battery won't hold a charge even though it's new. Or the starter is sluggish even though the battery is good. The problem is often corrosion on the alternator or starter terminals. I had a customer with a 2008 Ford F-150 that wouldn't hold a charge. He replaced the battery twice. The second battery was still dying after 2 weeks. The real problem was corrosion on the alternator output terminal. The alternator was charging, but the current was leaking through the corroded connection instead of flowing into the battery. Hydrogen peroxide cleans these terminals the same way it cleans battery terminals. Pour it on the corroded terminal, let it fizz for a few minutes, scrub with a wire brush, and wipe dry. The connection is restored. The alternator charges at full capacity. The starter draws full current. To do this, you need to locate the terminals. On the alternator, look for the large output terminal where the battery cable connects. On the starter, look for the terminal where the battery cable connects. Both are usually accessible from under the hood without removing any major components. Disconnect the battery negative cable first. Then apply hydrogen peroxide to the corroded terminal. Let it fizz. Scrub with a wire brush. Wipe dry. Reconnect the battery and test. The difference is immediate. The alternator charges faster. The starter cranks harder. The battery holds a charge. All from cleaning corrosion that costs $2 in hydrogen peroxide. Trick number 8. Dissolve calcium buildup inside windshield washer. Nozzles. Windshield washer nozzles clog from mineral buildup. Hard water leaves deposits inside the nozzles. The spray pattern gets weak. Then it stops completely. You have to replace the nozzles for $30 to $50, or you have to soak them in a chemical cleaner overnight. Hydrogen peroxide dissolves calcium buildup faster than soaking. Pour peroxide into a small container. Place the nozzles in the container so they're submerged. Let them soak for 30 minutes. The peroxide will bubble and fizz as it dissolves the calcium. After 30 minutes, take a small wire, a paperclip straightened out works, and carefully poke through the nozzle opening. The calcium will have softened enough that you can push it out. Rinse the nozzles with clean water and reinstall them. The spray pattern will be restored. This is a small trick, but it saves money and it's satisfying. You've just restored a function that seemed broken, and you did it for pennies instead of dollars. Trick number 9, clean oxidation. From aluminum engine components, aluminum oxidizes. Aluminum heads, aluminum valve covers, aluminum intake manifolds. They all develop a dull gray oxidation over time. This oxidation isn't rust, but it's corrosion. It doesn't affect performance, but it looks bad, and it can trap heat. Hydrogen peroxide dissolves aluminum oxidation. Pour it onto the oxidized surface and let it fizz for a few minutes. The oxidation will start to dissolve. Wipe with a soft cloth, and you'll see the aluminum shine underneath. For heavy oxidation, repeat the process. Pour more peroxide. Let it fizz. Wipe again. After a few passes, the aluminum will look like new. This is useful if you're restoring an engine or just trying to make the engine bay look clean. An engine with shiny aluminum components looks better maintained than an engine with dull oxidized aluminum. Trick number 10. Remove rust stains from painted surfaces. Without damaging paint, rust stains on painted surfaces, the kind that run down from a bolt or a fastener, look like the paint is damaged. They're not. They're just rust particles sitting on top of the paint. Hydrogen peroxide removes them without scratching or damaging the paint. Pour peroxide onto the rust stain. Let it sit for a few minutes. Wipe with a soft cloth. The rust will come away. Repeat if necessary. This is especially useful on door panels, fenders, and hood surfaces where rust stains from fasteners have left marks. A quick application of peroxide restores the appearance without a trip to the body shop. Trick number 11. Clean carbon deposits from oxygen. Sensor threads. Oxygen sensors thread into the exhaust manifold or the exhaust pipe. Over time, carbon deposits build up on the threads. When you try to remove an oxygen sensor, the threads can seize or strip. Hydrogen peroxide dissolves carbon deposits. Apply peroxide to the sensor threads and let it sit for 5 minutes. The carbon will soften. You'll have a better chance of removing the sensor without damaging it. This is a small but important trick. An oxygen sensor costs $100 to $200. If you break the threads in the exhaust manifold trying to remove a seized sensor, you've got a much bigger problem. A little peroxide beforehand prevents that disaster. Trick number 12. Restore clarity to yellowed plastic. Headlight lenses. Plastic headlight lenses yellow over time from UV exposure. The light output decreases. The headlights look old and cloudy. You can buy a headlight restoration kit for $30 to $50, or you can use hydrogen peroxide. Soak the headlights in hydrogen peroxide for several hours. The peroxide will penetrate the plastic and start to break down the yellowing compounds. After several hours, wipe the lenses with a soft cloth. The clarity will improve. It won't be perfect if the yellowing is severe, but it'll be noticeably better. For heavy yellowing, you can repeat the process or leave the headlights soaking overnight. The longer the peroxide is in contact with the plastic, the more yellowing it removes. This is a slow method compared to a headlight restoration kit, but it costs $2 instead of $50, and it works without abrasive compounds that can scratch the lens. Synthesis and application. You've just learned 12 uses for hydrogen peroxide that'll keep you out of the Quick-Lube and away from unnecessary repairs. Battery terminals, engine grease, coolant residue, rust, spark plugs, fasteners, alternator terminals, washer nozzles, aluminum oxidation, paint stains, oxygen sensor threads, and headlight lenses. 12 problems that the shop wants to charge you for, and 12 solutions that cost $2 and 15 minutes of your time. The pattern is the same in every case. Hydrogen peroxide is an oxidizing agent that breaks down organic compounds and mineral deposits. It fizzes when it works. You apply it, you wait, you scrub or wipe, and the problem dissolves. No special tools, no special knowledge, just patience and the willingness to try before you pay. Here's the single most powerful thing you can do today. The next time you're at the pharmacy and you see that $2 bottle of hydrogen peroxide, buy it. Keep it in your garage. When you see a problem in the engine bay, corrosion, grease, rust, mineral deposits, reach for the peroxide before you reach for your phone to call the shop. Spend 5 minutes. See what happens. Most of the time you'll solve the problem yourself and you'll understand your car better because you did. Next week I'm going to show you how to read the color and consistency of your engine oil to diagnose problems before they become expensive repairs. If you learned something today that you're going to use, that next video will complete what you need to know to stay ahead of the shop and keep your car running longer.